Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am joined once again today by Mr. Val Forgett of Navy Arms. We've seen Lord of War, which is largely based around the wall comes down and there's...
It is based on that period.
Bunkers
Absolutely.
and bunkers. So what's the real story? What actually transpired when that happened?
That's actually true.
And there we go. Hopefully you got... No, okay.
That's it. No, it's true in that it was a free-for-all. And there was a lot of fast and loose when it came to who owned what. And I'm talking about from a governmental standpoint. And again, lots of players dove into that, and not the least of which us. And there were lots of very successful people, both established like a Century Arms, as well as entities like KBI that were able to bring out Makarovs and SKSs out of Russia, and EAA was very successful as well in getting a lot of material out of there. But not just the Soviet Union, but like you said, all of the Eastern Bloc, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, East Germany. I mean, East German Makarovs, I remember, just were flying in as fast as they could come, and East German SKSs. Hungary, I'm sure I'm missing other countries here.
Poland,
yes, exactly.
How much of it was, I guess in my head, I always think of it as we didn't really bring much in from Russia, but we brought a lot in from former Soviet republics.
That's correct.
That broke off. Like, I know Ukraine was a big one for most of the guns.
Correct.
The Soviet Union stored a lot of guns in Ukraine.
Well, here's an interesting fact that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that putting aside from things like SKSs, there were every World War II era weapon that came out of the former Soviet Union, not a single gun came out of Mother Russia.
Okay.
It almost all came out of the Ukraine. And I remember going to the Ukraine on their first, they did an auction, and everything was in those auctions. There were Mausers, there were P-38s, there were 1911s. There were Lugers. I mean, it was just, it was unbelievable what we saw.
Because the Soviet Union didn't get rid of anything.
No.
It all got stashed.
And all of those guns clearly were reworked, and which would have been make-work projects from the 1950s, but they did stamp out all the Nazi markings, the fascist markings, as they referred to them all. They were all refinished, but they were packed perfectly. They were in these salt mines, and they really, that's really what it looked like. And at the time, it was very difficult because there was no international banking in the Ukraine, and there was no international cargo flights. So we had won a tender for 10,000 1911s and 10,000 P-38s. And this would have been 1993 or 94, and this is right when the Clinton administration shut down U.S. origin cures and relics. From the time we won the tender to the time we collected the guns, we couldn't get an import permit. So thankfully, my father made a deal with a big company in Germany called Waffen Franconia to sell all 10,000 to Franconia. But we still were able to get the P-38s. So what my father did was he sent me over to pack the deal. And because there was no international banks, corresponding banks, we couldn't set up a letter of credit. We weren't going to wire money before the goods were taken, and they certainly were not going to give us the goods without it. So what my father negotiated with the sellers was bearer bonds. So he sent me over with about $3 million of the bearer bonds.
Now, wait, bearer bonds are an element of heist movies.
No, but they exist. They work.
No,
they absolutely work.
No, they're fake. They're totally a Hollywood fake. Like,
no, I can attest that people. Hey, if they don't work, then we got a lot of guns for nothing. Because what happened was, so I spent 5 miserable days in Kyiv, and I say that 1983 Kyiv. All right, I'm sure Kyiv today is very lovely, but at the time, the hotels were terrible. The food was terrible. I mean, it was cold. It was just, everything was just yuck. And after getting these 5 days done, getting everything packed up, brought to the airport, my dad had hired a Malev cargo liner out of Budapest So, yeah, I know, right? So
This is Lord of War.
So he told me, I remember my father telling me this. He said, put the P-38s in the front of the plane, the 1911s in the back of the plane, and every so often ask them to pop, or tell them to pop a crate open to make sure they weren't just putting bricks in these things, right? So do all that, hop in the jump seat, fly to Budapest, land in Budapest, and Budapest is singularly, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, one of the most beautiful cities in the world to this day, even more so after spending 5 days in rainy, cold Kyiv. So we get the guns off the plane, and to kind of date myself, the P-38s I made sure got over to the TWA cargo area. This is in Budapest, and then the 1911s to the Lufthansa one to go to Germany. And part of this was Malov, the company, put me up at this beautiful suite at, I think it was the Intercontinental. It was overlooking the Chain Bridge and Parliament. And I mean, it was, and yes, nice. I was 23 years old. And back then there were no cell phones. There were no, I mean, fax was like the big thing of the day. So I call my father, I explained to him that everything's set, everything's on its way. And then I said to my father, and of course I'm there in this like terry cloth bathrobe and this nice fruit tray, and I'm drinking beer and all this. And I said, Dad, I don't know if Budapest is really this nice or Kyiv is really this horrible. And he goes, oh, it's a little of both, actually. And then he says to me, he goes, and you signed the bearer bonds, right? And I said, yeah, I did. And then it dawned on me, right? And I said to my father, Dad, what was keeping these guys from just, after I signed the bearer bonds, just shooting me in the head and dumping me and taking all the guns back? And my father, just over the phone, very nonchalantly says, oh, nothing. He goes, but there's probably 500,000-600,000 more guns. And he goes, and they're not going to get much for it if they start shooting Americans in the head. And I was like, and then there's this pause, right? And he goes, yeah, don't tell your mother that. So this is the first time if my mother watches this video, she will know that, yeah, my father, but then my mother would probably shrug and go, yeah, that was your dad.
This is the business you've chosen to be in.
Correct. But again, I think that his logic was sound.
Maybe you don't want to be the ones who show up for the last batch.
Correct. But certainly the first 20,000, you're golden.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, a lot out of Ukraine, a lot out of the other former communist states that when communism falls country by country.
And what's interesting though about my dad is that once those countries really started getting gummed up, and what happens is obviously prices start to go like that, right? So what my father did is he broke away and looked at other places that people were overlooking. I remember at that time, he made a deal with the British MOD to buy all of the L-42 sniper rifles. They had surplused, as well as about 6,000 Inglis high powers. Inglis high powers, with the Canadian maple leaf still on the grip panel. Yes, exactly. And I remember sorting those guns, and much like with the FRF2s now, just laying them all out, like I did over in the warehouse, and going through them all. There was 400 of those. He made a deal in India for the Ishapur.
Was that the 410?
No, these were the
regular
308
SMLEs.
The 2As.
Oh, okay, the 2As.
Fields,
nice.
Which also, interestingly, and to kind of circle back to the cure and relic discussion, because it was 1994 when that happened, we realized, oh, these are not cures and relics. And so we had to petition the ATF to get them, which we were able to do. But I remember being all set to go to India to pack that shipment, and the ATF denied our license and said, yeah, these are not cures and relics. And of course, by the time I got over there, we were able to sort that out and get those approved. And yeah, I spent several weeks in Jabalpur, India, packing about 70,000 Enfield rifles. Yeah.
Wow. Well, those are cool. I had one of those.
Yeah, they're great guns. And again, those are guns we sold for like $89. That if you can find them now are $500-600.
Yeah.
And they're tack drivers. They're absolute tack drivers.
Nice.
We took that gun. There used to be these congressional shoots, and we ended up squatted next to the HK guys with their snipers. And 300 meters, they were ringing a gong with it. And we were just shooting, steel plates of 50 yards with congressional staff. And I remember a very naive congressional staffer says to me, "Oh, what caliber is your gun?" And I said, .308. And they said, "Do you think you could hit the gong that these guys are hitting?" And I'm like, "I don't know." So I, ramped it up, took the first shot, was low, made an adjustment, of course, started hitting it. And then she looks at me and says to the HK guys, "How much is your gun?" And they said, $10,000. And she said, "How much is your gun?" $89. So, it was just a fun moment with a nice old military gun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. Sure. It's really cool to hear these stories firsthand.
Thanks, man.
From someone who was literally there.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.